The rising tide. The Corvaxi dominion spread through the galaxy like a plague, methodical and merciless. Their warships, massive constructs of dark metal and crackling energy, moved from system to system with devastating precision. They didn't seek alliances or trade. They demanded only submission or death. For 3 decades, the major powers of the Galactic Assembly watched with growing dread as distant worlds fell silent. The Vendari Stellar Republic, with its fleet of 10,000 ships, was the first major civilization to fall. Their diplomats arrived at Assembly headquarters desperate, pleading for a united defense. Before a coalition could form, the Vendari homeworld was reduced to ash, their once proud fleet scattered across 17 star systems. The Meridian technocracy followed 6 months later. Their adaptive defense networks, previously thought impenetrable, lasted only 3 days against Corvaxi warships. The technocracy's vast archives of scientific knowledge, collected over 15 millennia, were stripped and their planets harvested for resources. How do they keep advancing so quickly? Demanded High Chancellor Thrix of the Assembly, mandibles clicking in agitation as holographic displays showed yet another fallen system. Their technology evolves after every engagement. They assimilate, answered Ambassador Zarl of the Luminary Collective, their translucent skin pulsing with distress patterns. They don't just conquer. They absorb knowledge, adapt technologies, and implement improvements within days. The Assembly's combined naval forces, once thought undefeatable, crumbled against the Corvaxi onslaught. The vaunted Kithtal battlecruisers, with their temporal displacement shields, were outmaneuvered and destroyed. The Axiom Concord's psychic defenders were somehow blocked, their mental powers rendered useless by unknown Corvaxi countermeasures. Within 5 years, half the galaxy lay under Corvaxi control. Resistance seemed futile. The remaining free worlds began to consider surrender as their only option for survival. In this darkest hour, attention turned to a system that had largely been ignored in galactic politics, a small blue-green world in an unremarkable spiral arm. Earth had only achieved interstellar travel 50 years prior and maintained just a handful of colonies on nearby worlds. Humanity was considered primitive by most galactic standards, with rudimentary warp technology and limited military presence beyond their solar system. The Corvaxi tacticians marked Earth as a low-priority target, barely worth the resources to conquer. It would wait until the major threats were eliminated. This was their first mistake. What the Corvaxi, and indeed most of the Galactic Assembly, failed to recognize was humanity's unique history. Unlike most spacefaring species who had evolved in relatively stable environments with minimal competition, humans emerged from a planet rife with conflict and catastrophe. They had nearly destroyed themselves numerous times through war, faced extinction-level events, and survived despite overwhelming odds. And they had been watching the Corvaxi advance with calculating eyes. "We won't make the same mistakes as the others," said Admiral Kenta Ishida, addressing the United Earth Defense Council. The Assembly's forces fought conventionally: massive fleets, direct engagements, traditional tactics. The Corvaxi expected this and countered accordingly. "What's your alternative, Admiral?" asked Councillor Rodriguez. "Our entire fleet is a fraction of what the Vendari had, and they were obliterated." Admiral Ishida's weathered face creased into a grim smile. "We won't send a fleet. We'll send a single ship." The council chamber erupted in protests, but Ishida raised his hand. "Project Defiance is ready." On a classified orbital facility above Mars, Captain Alina Chen stood before a viewport, gazing at the sleek vessel docked beyond. Unlike the bulky, imposing designs favored by most species, the UES Defiance was elegant, almost predatory in appearance. Its hull gleamed with a strange iridescence, a product of the metamaterial coating that made it nearly invisible to most detection systems. "Final systems check complete, Captain," reported Commander Alejandro Vega, her XO. "All experimental systems are green." Elena nodded, her expression solemn. At 42, She had spent the last 15 years helping develop the technologies that made defiance possible. The ship represented the culmination of human ingenuity, a vessel designed not to overpower enemies but to outthink them. The crew, she asked. All 200 aboard and ready. The best we have. Engineers, tacticians, xenobiologists. Half of them helped build her systems. Elena turned from the viewport. Then it's time. The Corvaxi just breached the Arcturus defensive line. They'll be moving on the Proxima Centauri colony within weeks. You know the odds, Captain, Vega said quietly. Even with everything we've built into Defiance. I know the math, Alex, she interrupted. But the Corvaxi don't understand humans. We don't calculate odds the same way they do. She placed a hand on the bulkhead. They expect submission when faced with superior force. But humanity's history is written by those who refuse to submit, even when victory seemed impossible. 3 days later, the Defiance slipped its moorings and accelerated to warp speed, vanishing from Earth's sensors. Rather than heading to reinforce Proxima Centauri as expected, Elena directed the ship deeper into Corvaxi territory, toward what intelligence suggested was a major supply hub near the former Vendari homeworld. Bold move, commented Lieutenant Commander Fatima Hassan, tactical officer. They won't expect us to strike so deep. Exactly, Elena replied. The Corvaxi expand methodically, fortifying as they go. Their frontline forces are their strongest, but like any empire that expands too quickly, their supply lines are vulnerable. The Defiance's first engagement came sooner than expected. The Corvaxi patrol of 3 warships detected anomalous readings and altered course to investigate. Elena ordered no evasive action. Let them come, she said. Time to see if our theories hold. As the Corvaxi ships approached, the Defiance remained passive, appearing as little more than a merchant vessel. The alien warships moved to surround it, energy weapons charging. They're scanning us, reported Lieutenant Park at sensors. But they're only seeing what we want them to see. The quantum camouflage system, derived from studying captured Corvaxi technology, was working perfectly. Instead of detecting the Defiance's true capabilities, the enemy scanners registered a lightly armed transport. They're hailing us, said Communications Officer John. Standard surrender demand. Elena smiled. Decline with prejudice. What happened next would later be described by a Corvaxi survivor as impossible. As the enemy vessels moved to firing positions, the Defiance suddenly shifted, its hull reconfiguring in real time. Hidden weapon ports opened, revealing systems the Corvaxi scanners never detected. The first salvo wasn't directed at the enemy ships themselves, but at the space between them. Specialized projectiles detonated, creating localized distortions in subspace, a technology humanity had developed by reverse engineering damaged Corvaxi drive systems. The distortions played havoc with the Corvaxi neural-linked command systems. Their ships, temporarily disoriented, fired wildly, missing the Defiance entirely. Phase 2, ordered Elena. The Defiance moved with startling agility for its size, executing maneuvers that should have torn a ship of its class apart. The adaptive hull, another innovation, redistributed structural stress in real time, allowing the vessel to pull turns and accelerations beyond normal tolerances. Targeting their propulsion nodes, Fatima announced, fingers dancing across her console. They haven't adapted their shields to our frequency yet. The Defiance's main weapons fired, not the energy beams or plasma torrents used by most species, but accelerated particles in quantum superposition states. The bizarre nature of the attack meant Corvaxi shields, designed to block defined energy patterns, were partially permeable to the human weapons. The first enemy warship lost propulsion immediately. The second tried to retreat but found its systems mysteriously malfunctioning, the result of infiltration nanites deployed during the initial exchange. The third managed to fire a direct hit on the Defiance, but the adaptive hull absorbed and redistributed the energy, actually using it to power a counterattack. Within 15 minutes, all 3 Corvaxi vessels were disabled. Board and secure, Elena ordered. I want their central cores intact. Full containment protocols. As boarding teams prepared, Elena studied the disabled warships. This skirmish was barely a footnote in the war, but it confirmed what humanity had suspected. The Corvaxi weren't invincible. They were predictable, reliant on technological superiority rather than tactical flexibility. First blood to us, murmured Commander Vega, standing beside her. But they'll adapt. Elena nodded grimly. So will we. That's what humans do best. The intelligence gathered from the captured vessels proved invaluable. The Defiance's tech teams discovered vulnerabilities in Corvaxi systems that even the aliens themselves didn't realize existed. More importantly, they gained insight into the command structure of the Dominion, centralized, hierarchical, and surprisingly brittle. As the Defiance continued its journey deeper into enemy territory, Elena studied the tactical display in her ready room. The Corvaxi had conquered through fear and overwhelming force. They had never faced an adversary that fought asymmetrically, that struck where they were weakest rather than meeting strength with strength. Time to change the rules of engagement, she said to herself, setting course for the heart of Corvaxi territory. Let's show them how humans wage war. Turning the tide. News of the Defiance's victory spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. What began as a single ship's daring campaign evolved into a symbol of resistance. The Corvaxi, accustomed to striking fear, now faced an unfamiliar emotion: uncertainty. 6 months into its mission, the Defiance had disrupted supply lines across 17 sectors. It appeared without warning, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. The ship seemed to predict Corvaxi movements before they happened, turning their own tactics against them. How? Demanded War Master Kravix, supreme commander of the Corvaxi forces, his exoskeleton bristling with rage indicators. How does one ship continue to evade our fleets? Unknown War Master, answered Sub-Commander Dren, visibly fearful of his superior's wrath. We've deployed predictive algorithms based on previous encounters, but the human vessel's behavior pattern defies standard analysis. Then develop non-standard analysis. Kryvex slammed an armored appendage against the tactical display, cracking it. Increase patrols on all critical supply routes. Divert forces from the conquest front if necessary. This was the beginning of the Corvaxi's second mistake, reactive strategy. By responding to the Defiance's attacks, they were allowing a single ship to dictate the movement of their entire fleet. Resources meant for conquering new worlds were instead tied up defending supply lines and installations. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Chen studied the latest intelligence with satisfaction. The ship had just completed its most daring raid yet, infiltrating a Corvaxi research facility and extracting crucial data about their adaptive shield technology. They're pulling back offensive operations in 3 sectors, reported Commander Vega, highlighting regions on the galactic map. Worlds that were scheduled for conquest are getting a reprieve. And our losses? Elena asked, scanning the damage reports. Minimal. Hull integrity at 89%. 2 crew injured, none critical. We lost 1 stealth drone during extraction. Elena nodded, relief evident in her eyes. Despite the Defiance's advanced technology, every engagement carried extreme risk. The ship's ability to repair itself, using systems adapted from Corvaxi technology, had proven invaluable, but there were limits to what could be fixed in deep space, far from support. Captain, called Lieutenant Zhang from communications, we're receiving a transmission on a low-frequency band. It's not Corvaxi. Source: a small outpost in the Vega Proxima system. It appears to be survivors from the Luminary Collective. Elena raised an eyebrow. The Luminary had been among the first major civilizations conquered by the Corvaxi. Intelligence had suggested they were all but extinct. On screen, she ordered. The view screen resolved to show a luminary, their translucent skin dimmed to near opacity, a sign of extreme stress in their species. Behind them, a makeshift operations center bustled with activity. What surprised Elena most was the diversity of the beings visible, not just luminary, but several species working together. "Greetings, human vessel," the luminary began. "I am Coordinator Neri of the Resistance Coalition. We have been monitoring your actions against the Dominion with great interest." "Resistance Coalition?" Elena questioned. "I wasn't aware such an organization existed." "Necessity forced cooperation where diplomacy failed," Neri explained. "The Corvaxi Conquest united survivors from dozens of civilizations. We've been fighting a shadow war from hidden bases and abandoned systems. And now you're reaching out to us. Why?" "Because you've accomplished what we thought impossible. You've made the Corvaxi vulnerable." Neri's skin pulsed with excitement patterns. "We have intelligence, resources, and fighters scattered across Corvaxi territory. What we lacked was hope, until your ship proved the enemy could be defeated." Over the following weeks, the Defiance coordinated with resistance cells throughout conquered space. What had been isolated attacks became a synchronized campaign. The Resistance provided intelligence on Corvaxi movements and weak points, while the Defiance shared technological innovations that could be implemented by guerrilla forces. "It's working better than we could have hoped," Commander Vega observed, watching as indicators of Corvaxi control flickered and dimmed across the tactical display. "Their forces are stretched thin trying to maintain order on conquered worlds, while still defending against us." Elena nodded, but her expression remained grave. "They're adapting, though. Each engagement gets harder. They're studying our tactics, developing countermeasures." "Then we change tactics again," Fatima suggested. "Keep them guessing." "There's another option," said Dr. Sanjay Mehta, the ship's chief science officer. He had been analyzing data from captured Corvaxi technology for months. "I believe I found a weakness in their command structure itself." He brought up a complex diagram on the main screen. "The Corvaxi operate through a neural network linking their commanders. It's how they coordinate so effectively across vast distances. But the network has a vulnerability. It can't handle logical paradoxes or recursive feedback loops." Elena leaned forward, intrigued. "You're suggesting psychological warfare?" "Precisely," Sanjay confirmed. "If we can introduce conflicting information into their command network, it could cascade through their entire hierarchy." The plan was daring to the point of recklessness. It would require the Defiance to penetrate to the very heart of Corvaxi space, their throne world of Corvaxi Prime, and interface directly with their central command network. "The resistance cells can create diversions," Elena explained during a strategy session with her senior officers. "Draw their defensive forces away from key positions. Meanwhile, we'll use everything we've learned about their detection systems to approach undetected. Even if we succeed," Vega cautioned, "they'll throw everything they have at us once they realize what's happening." Elena's expression hardened. "Then we make sure it's too late by the time they figure it out." The operation began 3 weeks later. Across Corvaxi territory, resistance cells launched coordinated attacks on military installations, supply depots, and communication relays. The sudden widespread rebellion forced the Dominion to disperse its forces, creating the opening the Defiance needed. Using experimental stealth technology that bent light and other sensor wavelengths around its hull, the ship slipped past the outer defenses of Corvaxi Prime. The planet itself was a monument to conquest, its surface lined with enormous structures built from materials harvested from 100 conquered worlds. "Approaching insertion point," Fatima reported, her voice tense. The Defiance hung in low orbit, using a larger moon for cover. Defense grid is active but focused outward. They're not expecting an enemy this close. "Deploy the infiltration team," Elena ordered. A specialized shuttle detached from the Defiance, carrying a team of engineers and tactical specialists, led by Commander Vega. Their mission was to reach a primary network junction and upload Dr. Mehta's program. A cascade of contradictory commands and logical impossibilities designed to paralyze the Corvaxi command structure. Elena watched from the bridge as the shuttle disappeared from sensors, its own stealth systems engage. "Now we wait," she said, knowing this was perhaps the most dangerous part of the mission, remaining stationary in enemy territory. The infiltration team maintained radio silence, but their progress could be tracked through encrypted data bursts sent at irregular intervals. They reached the surface undetected, using access points identified by resistance intelligence. Corvaxi security was focused outward, not expecting enemies to penetrate so deeply into their territory. 2 hours into the mission, alarms suddenly blared across the bridge. "We've been detected," called Lieutenant Park. "Multiple warships altering course toward our position." Alina's mind raced through options. Time until they're in weapons range. 12 minutes. And the infiltration team. Still no confirmation of upload completion. Alina made her decision. "Move us into the open. Make it obvious we're here." "Captain," questioned Fatima. "We're the distraction now," Alina explained. "If they focus on us, the team has a better chance." The Defiance broke cover, engines flaring as it accelerated away from the moon. Immediately, Corvaxi defense platforms locked on, and approaching warships increased speed. "Evasive pattern Delta," Alina ordered. "Use the planetary rings for cover when possible. Weapons hot but hold fire until my command." The ship danced through space, pushing its adaptive hull to the limits as it absorbed glancing hits from defense platforms. 5 Corvaxi warships, then 10, converged on its position. "Still no signal from the team," reported Zhang anxiously. "Hold position as long as possible," Alina replied, gripping her command chair as the ship shuddered under a direct hit. "They'll complete the mission." On the surface, Commander Vega's team fought through unexpected resistance. Their insertion had been clean, but internal security protocols had detected their presence as they neared the network core. "Cover me," Vega ordered as his team established a defensive perimeter. He connected Dr. Meta's device to the pulsing network interface, initiating upload now. Back on the Defiance, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Shield strength was failing, and multiple systems reported damage. "Captain, we can't hold position much longer," warned Fatima. 2 more direct hits and... "Signal from the surface," interrupted Zhang. "Upload complete. Extraction team is falling back to the shuttle." Relief washed over Alina's face, quickly replaced by determination. "All power to engines. Hit us clear of the gravity well." The Defiance surged forward, taking hit after hit as it fought to escape. Around them, something strange began to happen. The Corvaxi ships, previously coordinated in their attack, started to move erratically. Some fired on empty space, others stopped entirely. "It's working," breathed Fatima, watching the tactical display. "The command network is failing." Throughout Corvaxi space, the effect cascaded outward. Warships received contradictory orders, defense platforms shut down, and ground forces fell into disarray. The rigid hierarchy that had made the Dominion so effective became its undoing, as confusion spread from commanders to subordinates. The Defiance, despite severe damage, retrieved the infiltration team and limped away from Corvaxi Prime. Behind them, the once mighty heart of the Dominion descended into chaos. Over the following months, the Resistance Coalition, supported by the Defiance, systematically liberated conquered worlds. Without centralized command, Corvaxi forces were isolated and overwhelmed. Many surrendered rather than face destruction. 1 year after the Defiance's first engagement, delegates from across the galaxy gathered on neutral ground to form a new galactic assembly. At its center stood Captain Alina Chen and her crew, honored as the catalysts who had changed the course of history. The Corvaxi believed that superior technology and overwhelming force guaranteed victory. Alina addressed the assembly. They failed to understand that true strength lies in adaptation, in finding new solutions when old ones fail. She gazed around the chamber at the diverse species represented, many who had been bitter enemies before the Corvaxi threat united them. Humanity never claimed to be the strongest civilization in the galaxy, but we understand something that the Corvaxi never did. Sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the largest fleet or the most powerful weapon. She smiled. Sometimes it's a single ship with the right crew, at the right place, with the determination to change what everyone else believed was inevitable. As the assembly erupted in applause, Alina thought of the countless lives lost during the Corvaxi conquest. The victory was bittersweet. It had come at tremendous cost. But looking at the united faces before her, she knew the galaxy had emerged stronger. A new era had begun, not one dominated by a single power, but a diverse alliance of civilizations bound by the shared experience of facing extinction and finding hope in the darkest hour. And it had started with a single human warship that refused to accept defeat.